My name is Arlette, and I'm 29 years old. The smell of roasted turkey still makes my jaw tighten because that was the night my brother stood up at unthanksgiving and announced our parents had secretly given him the company I built and that I was getting nothing. We were seated around my parents' long oak table, the same one where I'd once balanced invoices and laptops while everyone else watched football, and the candles flickered like they knew something awful was coming. My brother cleared his throat with that practiced confidence he always wore like a tailored suit, lifted his glass, and said it loudly enough to pin every conversation to the wall. "Before we eat, I just want to thank Mom and Dad for believing in me and officially handing me the company." And then, with a smile that cut, he added, "Arlette won't be involved anymore." I felt heat rise behind my eyes, not because I was surprised. Betrayal has a smell too, metallic and familiar, but because the timing was surgical, chosen to humiliate. My parents didn't look at me, not even when he said I was getting nothing, as if the word itself were a verdict already stamped. I built that company from a borrowed desk in a drafty studio, nights powered by cheap coffee and stubborn hope, while my brother was finding himself on my dime. And now he was standing there like a hero in a story he'd never written. I thought of the first client I landed by promising a turnaround I barely knew how to deliver, the contracts I negotiated with hands shaking under the table, the payroll weeks when I paid my team before myself because I couldn't bear to let them down, and all of it flashed through me as my mother dabbed her lips with a napkin and my father studied the grain of the wood as if it could absolve him. My brother kept talking, embellishing the narrative, saying our parents wanted stability, wanted a real leader, wanted someone who could take it to the next level. And I could hear the air in the room thin, forks hovering, relatives holding their breath, because family dinners have a way of becoming trials without juries. My aunt's eyes flicked toward me, my cousin coughed, and the silence begged me to play my part, to shrink, to swallow it. Instead, I took a sip of wine, slow enough to feel the cool glass against my lips, and I tasted the courage I'd been hoarding for years, because that was the moment the words on the thumbnail of my life formed themselves exactly as they would later be repeated. My brother stood up at Thanksgiving and announced our parents had secretly given him the company I built and that I was getting nothing. So I took a sip of wine, looked at my dad, and said, "Should I tell them now, or do you want to?" The question landed like a dropped plate, shattering the careful story my brother was telling. And for the first time that night, my father looked at me. His eyes held the panic of a man who knows a locked drawer has just been rattled. He stammered something about timing, about family, about gratitude. But the room had shifted toward me. Gravity recalibrated, and I could feel years of being the quiet one peel away. I remembered the emails I'd saved, the signatures I'd insisted on when my parents pushed me to keep it informal, the clauses I'd added late at night because I trusted paper more than promises. I remembered my brother's name missing from the documents when it mattered, and mysteriously appearing when it didn't, and I understood then that their plan relied on my silence more than his speech. I didn't raise my voice, didn't need to, because calm can be louder than shouting, and I let the pause stretch until even the turkey seemed to cool. Then I asked again gently, "Should I tell them now, or do you want to?" My brother's smile wavered. The room leaned in, and in that held breath I felt something unfamiliar bloom, control, because the truth, once invited, has a way of walking in without asking permission, and I knew that whatever happened next, the story would no longer be told about me without me in the room. The room stayed frozen after my question, and in that silence I finally understood how much power comes from simply refusing to be erased. My dad opened his mouth, closed it, then tried to laugh it off, but the laugh cracked, and my brother shifted his weight like a man realizing the ground under him wasn't solid anymore. while I set my glass down carefully and told them there were things everyone deserved to hear, because this wasn't just about hurt feelings, it was about truth. I explained how the company hadn't been a family project the way they like to say, but something I had started alone at 23, with a loan I repaid myself. How every early contract listed me as founder and sole owner. How my parents had only come in later, offering advice that slowly turned into pressure, and how my brother's sudden promotion happened behind my back while I was negotiating our biggest expansion. I watched faces change as details replaced assumptions, and I could feel the narrative slipping from my brother's grip as relatives leaned forward, asking questions he couldn't answer. My mother tried to interrupt, saying this wasn't the place, that Thanksgiving was about togetherness, but I pointed out, still calm, still steady, that they had chosen this place when they announced I was getting nothing, and that togetherness built on lies was just a prettier word for control. My brother snapped that I was exaggerating, that the company needed a stronger presence, and that he was only stepping up. And that's when I slid the folder I'd brought, unopened until that moment, across the table toward my dad, telling him he could either explain the signatures himself or let me do it. The folder contained copies of incorporation papers, equity agreements, and emails acknowledging my sole ownership, and as my dad flipped through them, his shoulders sagged, the weight of proof bending him forward, while my brother's confidence drained into anger. Someone gasped when they realized my brother had been named interim CEO without legal authority, and another relative murmured that this looked bad, very bad. I didn't relish their discomfort, but I also didn't soften the truth. I said I had discovered the transfer attempt weeks earlier, had already consulted counsel, and had decided to wait until Thanksgiving only because I hoped they'd choose honesty before spectacle. But since they hadn't, I was done protecting feelings at the cost of my future. The argument erupted then, voices overlapping, accusations flying, my brother insisting he'd been promised everything since childhood, my parents pleading that they were just trying to keep peace, and me repeating again and again that peace without fairness is just a silence and forced. Eventually, my uncle stood and told everyone to stop, reminding them that facts mattered more than pride. And in that pause, my dad finally admitted what he'd tried to hide, that the company was legally mine, that any attempt to give it away would fail, and that they'd hoped pressure would make me comply. Hearing it out loud felt like a door closing behind me, final and freeing, and I stood, thanked everyone for listening, and said I was leaving, because the rest could be handled through lawyers, not leftovers. I walked out into the cold night with my coat half buttoned, heart racing, but spine straight, and for the first time in years, I felt light, like I'd set down a burden I didn't know I was carrying. The weeks that followed were messy, angry messages, forced apologies, and eventually silence. But the outcome was clear. My brother lost his illusion of inheritance, my parents lost the leverage they relied on, and I gained something more valuable than an apology, which was clarity. The company stabilized under leadership chosen for competence, not blood, and I learned that family loyalty doesn't mean accepting betrayal as tradition. When people ask me now if I regret speaking up at that table, I think back to the candles, the turkey, the way my voice didn't shake when I asked, should I tell them now or do you want to? And I smile because that question changed everything, not just for me, but for anyone watching who's been pushed aside, underestimated, or told they were getting nothing after giving everything. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been pushed aside, underestimated, or told you were getting nothing after giving everything, then stay with this channel. Subscribe now so you don't miss more real, powerful stories about standing up, reclaiming your worth, and watching the truth finally take the seat it deserves at the